Friday morning, there was an article in Anchorage Dispatch News talking about new rule change for the Iditarod, which would allow communications, two-way communications for mushers on the race. We haven't actually heard from the Iditarod to see exactly the wording, but according to the Dispatch News, the board decided to allow two-way communications and apparently in extension coaching. So we just wanted to touch on what that affects and who it's going to help, hurt in the race, and what are some of the changes that it would, imply or that we might see down the road. So obviously all this is still being developed, and we haven't actually seen the rule written by the Iditarod yet. Anyways, the first thing I wanted to touch on was, what are the pros?
Pros are, like last year with the snowmobile instance, someone could have got on a phone and called ahead and had some help brought out to him immediately. Maybe Ali Zirkle could have got on the phone and had another snow machiner out before the Jeff King thing happened.
It could have saved one dog's life.
Yes.
Something that seriously affected Jeff's race, and two other dogs that were seriously injured.
Yes.
And also there was other safety concerns on the race, and I think that people would feel more secure perhaps having a way to communicate, call home. So that's clearly, I think, the upside, right? Would you agree that that's kind of what spurred this thing into action?
Most definitely, yes.
Now, the inevitable downside is that while it is a safety aspect, I am of the opinion, and I think you as well, I think most other mushers are of the opinion that it's not necessary to allow coaching to be able to have a two-way communication that could help you in the event of an emergency.
Yes, definitely not. We do not need coaching to help us there. That goes far deeper, than just having a safety device. Having a cell phone is a whole new thing.
Yeah, it would seriously change how we run the race and what it takes to be competitive in the race, and what the race looks like from a day-to-day basis, from a musher perspective. What we do in a day would change,
yes.
And the things that we think about would change, and our attention would be not necessarily on this dog right now, what do I know, but more on what information can I get. Can I get a hold of this person? Oh, I've got a friend in this checkpoint, maybe they could tell me something. But when the IOFC had its meeting after the 2016 Iditarod and kind of reviewing these incidents on the trail, the IOFC's official recommendation to the board was that we be allowed to have a two-way communication that's only allowed to be used communicating with race officials.
Yes.
For example, there's the GPS texting device. You know what it's called? We were just talking about it and we both forgot it. There's a two-way texting device that every single text you send is tracked. It can be monitored. It sends your exact location. Other people have suggested having a sat phone in a sealed bag. In an emergency, you open the sealed bag, you make a call. If it turns out that you're in a real emergency that is something like a snow machine attacking you, or something that's not going to, isn't like you're gaining a competitive advantage, you're not going to be penalized in the race. But if you're calling to get help on making a decision, maybe a different action would be taken. So I guess the question is, does this rule solve the problem? Does it solve the problem plus open up a whole other can of worms?
It definitely opens up another can of worms. It would solve the problem, but there's other ways to solve the problem without opening up the can of worms, definitely. And it leads to so much. I could call home and say, hey, I kept a log on this dog all year. Has it had a sore wrist? Because it's getting a sore wrist.
Yeah.
And
was it the right side or the left side that was hurt before?
Like, is this something I'm going to be able to fix in 10 minutes while I rest, or is this something that is just going to stay here and I need to drop this dog and move on so I don't haul it?
Yeah.
Things like that, having snow machines out on the trail to tell us. We can call ahead and ask how the weather is, how the trail is. And, personally I can't afford that. I do have people who offered to do it for me, but, it would open up a whole new realm of involvement in the race, I guess.
It would change the race as we know it, in my opinion.
Definitely.
So again, the IOFC Iditarod Official Finishers Club official recommendation was to have two-way communication with the race. I think what we should have is the mushers can bring a sat phone if they like. They can bring one of these texting devices, or satellite texting devices, and have an Iditarod switchboard. That this is the phone number you call. Yep. If you're in an emergency, call this number. You will not get in trouble for calling this number. Now, if you end up subsequently getting outside assistance, that may affect your race. But if you're getting harassed by a snow machine, call this number. That person can get a race official on the phone. It can contact people in the villages that's closest to you to help you. If you're having emergency with a dog, they could get a vet on the phone.
Yep.
And all the while not changing the coaching aspect and
Definitely.
keeping the integrity of the race.
Yep.
I think that's what the mushers wanted to see.
Definitely.
And not necessarily a complete revamping of the structure of the race.
Yep.
So we're kind of touching on what it changes. These are other solutions that could solve the problem without changing the race. So how would you see on the race, what is this going to change? In the past, are there situations you can think of that's like, man, if I had only known, if I could have called home and found out, what would I have done differently? How would that have changed the race?
Definitely. So, like in 2015 when we left from Fairbanks, I didn't know the miles. I took off way in the back of the pack. I stayed way in the back of the pack for a long time, and I could have called home and said, how long did Dallas take to do this run? And then I could have known what my run was going to be there.
That's a very good point.
I also forgot my schedule at home. I could have called home and had a schedule read to me and rewrote it on the paper and knew what I was planning on doing.
Or got it emailed to you and checked your email at the next checkpoint.
Exactly. So
I've never thought about that aspect. You're right, because mid-run, because especially when you're in the front of the race, there may only be an hour or two between you and the next musher, or 4 hours. And so when I leave checkpoint A, the musher isn't to the next checkpoint yet, but after I'm halfway through the run, I can find out this is going to be a 12-hour run. That's what it took Brent Sass to do it. I need to stop and camp. Where he didn't have the value or the advantage of that knowledge being the first musher over the trail necessarily. So that's a major change.
Major.
Run to run.
Yes.
I certainly think in 14 with the storms,
Yep.
had somebody called Allie and said that, Mitch and Dallas are not stopped at the shelter cabin at the end of Topcock, and Dallas is going to be there in 20 minutes. I would be willing to bet she would have left 20 minutes before I got there rather than 20 minutes after I got there, and that would have undoubtedly changed the outcome of the 2014 race.
Would have made a huge difference. And also, I'm sitting next to the toughest headed musher in Iditarod right now, and every once in a while I hit a down spot. This guy probably doesn't hit too many of those down spots. Maybe here and there.
Hide it well.
But when I can call home and hear that Dallas Seavey's going slower than I am, or Dallas Seavey's stopped and when I didn't expect him to, or hey, he's only an hour ahead of you, you have a chance of catching him, as to where I look at it and go, man, he's a whole hour ahead of me, there's no way I can catch him. But they're looking at it in a whole different light because they are not sleep deprived, they're not tired. And it can put a whole new perspective on the way some people run this race that normally wouldn't be able to pull things off.
Yeah, no, I that's one of the main things that I think is one of my personal strengths and advantages, and probably true for a lot of perhaps the younger mushers, perhaps not, I don't know, I don't want to get age involved here, but I'll just speak for myself. I feel like one of my advantages is being able to make decisions late in the race, and I do see people struggling, towards the end to make coherent decisions, and they're maybe a little bit pessimistic. That's something I've really worked on, is being able to make balanced decisions when I know my body's under serious distress. How do you balance that and weigh that? And I don't want people to be able to call and help. That's what the musher is, part of the team, and you're part of making decisions, not the people back home that have a clear, well-rested head. And mushing families. Okay, I've got, how many people do I know that have run the Iditarod and can help me on this? Other people, they might be the only person in their family that's run the Iditarod. They're not going to have the same support crew there.
Yep, definitely not. Well, I mean, when I hit the coast, a lot of times, now more than ever, I know what the dogs can handle, what I can handle, things like that. If I'm able to call back to Danny Seavey or someone with the knowledge that you have and say, look, I don't think my dogs can handle this, he can say, look, Ramey Smith's done it, Dallas has done it, this person's done it, I think you can do it. Your dog team's looking good on these videos, you're looking good, you can do this. As to where me personally sitting there thinking, I can't do this, could change hugely when someone else is telling me, yes, you can.
There's another aspect to that I was kind of contemplating yesterday, and that is from the dog's point of view, from that standpoint, on paper, a lot of things look doable. But the musher is the one that sees, it's more than even sees, it's you feel this dog, if I push it any harder, we're going to start having trouble. And that's the limiting factor. That's what keeps you in check, so where you can finish the race and finish strong and keep moving right up to the finish line and passing teams the whole way. And I think as soon as we start having people back home looking at the videos, because the teams always look better coming into the checkpoints. The dogs see the checkpoint, they go charging in there, and they say, I saw your video, you coming in, you looked way better than this other team. you should just keep going, and then you start questioning yourself. Well, maybe I am tired and pessimistic. Maybe they do have a clear head. And I think for the dog's sake, you're the person on the sled that knows the dogs, that needs to make those decisions, and I don't think having outside assistance is going to be the best thing for the team day by day, step by step, because it really is an intuition that I don't think this is the right thing. I couldn't put my finger on why I'm going to make this decision or why I'm not. It's more of just a feeling, because we spend how many hours on a dog team, on this dog team, before this race each year? A lot.
Well, how many times in life do we have people who make decisions for us every once in a while? We're like, I can't do that, I'm not going to do that, and they talk you into doing it. That can happen on Iditarod as well, and it can have a serious effect on our teams and our dogs' health and well-being as well if we let someone else convince us of doing something that is not right for our teams.
And I'll acknowledge, and I think this is a good point to point out, that ultimately it is the musher's responsibility to make that decision.
Oh, most definitely.
But it is going to be more information that's coming in that we're going to have to process. And when you have somebody at home saying you really need to do this because they have their reasons, X, Y, Z, it puts pressure on you to make that decision, and going against what they're saying. And then you're always concerned, well, are they going to say that I stopped in between because I was tired, because I then there's the ego thing that gets involved. But ultimately it is the musher's responsibility to make good decisions for their dogs, regardless of what the culture or people are saying. So that brings us to another point, and who does this help? Who does it help? Who does it hurt when you look at winning the Iditarod or being competitive in the Iditarod in the next 10 years?
Not to bring up any names, but there are a couple kennels in this sport that have unlimited resources and unlimited pockets, maybe bottomless pockets. Those people can have planes. Some of us are involved with helicopter tours. They can have helicopters out on the trail. They can have snow machines out on the trail. They can have whatever crew they want out there reporting back to them. They can have a helicopter going between them and the next team in front of them. Sometimes my team, when snow machines are sitting there going back and forth past me, sometimes that's a problem for me. And right now it's very limited, but if this happens, it's going to be huge.
And I think we've all come into checkpoints just fuming because there were snow machines that passed us numerous times to get footage. Some of it for the insider, some of it for who knows what. Sometimes it's just other people out on the trail that want to get pictures as you go by, but it really does affect the trail, and it affects your team. They go from running on a nice, crisp, hard trail to being in 4 inches of sugar snow. That zaps your energy, and it pisses you off, and that affects things. And certainly, if this rule were to go where coaching's an unlimited thing, I would have to do whatever I could to maximize that if I want to keep being competitive. And I might have a better ability than some, but I know there's people that have far better abilities than me to maximize this. But I would have to, for the sake of being competitive in the race, do everything I could to be as good as I can at this race, right? That's what we're trying to do, is be as good at the whole thing. And that's not just running these 8.5 or 9 days. It's kennel management, it's breeding, it's nutrition, it's the healthcare, it's making good decisions on the race, which would include coaching. So I would have to allocate funds. I would have to shuck and jive and have money to have support out there. I would want to know what's next on the trail, particularly towards the end of the race. I would want to know who's where, not so much in the beginning, but what the trail is like coming up, how long it's taken other teams to do it. This is information I would feel like I would have to have, or else I would be at a kind of a disadvantage to my competitors. And I could probably figure out how to afford that. I wouldn't say I have bottomless pockets, but it's something I aspire to someday. But I know I would have a better ability at that than some kennels who it's just not practical.
Well, just comparing
even
ourselves,
adding a cell phone or a sat phone.
I mean, not say, like you said, you don't have bottomless pockets, but your pockets are deeper than mine, obviously, right? And so just between the two of us, it's going to make an enormous difference.
So how much harder would it be for you to move up from 4th to 1st if this rule is added versus not?
It's going
to make it harder for you than it will for my dad or myself, Baker, Jeff. I mean, the guys who have been around it for a long time and have established businesses. It makes it harder for the young guys who don't have a tour company of however many years. And I don't knock these guys for making money and spending it on what they want. You're right, you can do that. But as far as the sport's concerned, my favorite thing about wrestling is you can have all the great coaching. Money can buy better workout equipment, but money can buy a better gym, better advice. But once you set foot on the mat, It's a 60 kilos of this person and 60 kilos of this person. It doesn't matter if you're from California, Florida, Alaska, New York. It doesn't matter if your parents are millionaires or dead broke. Once you're out there, it's person against person. And this race, I think it probably makes some difference, what's in your drop bags, if you can afford to have everything that you want. But I think most people do have a pretty similar stuff in their drop bags. I don't think once you're on the race that the money makes a whole lot of difference.
No.
Once the race starts. But this changes that.
It definitely changes that. I mean, when I'm sitting outside of Elam and you're trying to figure out if you need to chase me or not, and I'm stopped, you're going to know whether or not you need to chase me, whether or not you need to stop in Elam, or whether I just went out a mile and camped.
Twice I've gone through Elam and camped, actually 3 times now, somewhere between 2 and 20 miles out of Elam. And it leaves a question mark in the people following you. Is he going to go all the way to White Mountain or not?
And that can make a huge difference whether or not you go for it. This year, Pete Kaiser came into Elam. I was watching him come down the road as I was dropping onto the ice. He did not know that. He did not know I was leaving in front of him. He could not see me, but I could see him. And if he would have known that, he would have came straight through. I would have been 5th this year because he had a faster moving team. He was working just as hard as I was for the race and everything else, but he stopped there thinking that I went straight through, and he waited, and that set him back to where he was. And if he would have known I was right there, he even told me this, if I would have known you were right there, I would have came after you. And in all honesty, he probably would have passed me.
Yeah, and that brings us back to another point is when he came in there not knowing that you had just left, the only thing he had to go on to make that decision was what his team looked like. And now if he knows that you're just ahead of him, it puts a lot more pressure on him to make that move. And that's something he probably could have figured out from looking at the paper, but as you know, and I certainly have experienced this, that we don't always look at the paper, or we don't always grasp what it means when you come in and see the check-in list. And 14, I certainly didn't. I could have looked at the stats there, but I certainly didn't take the time to do that. When I asked the checkers, what's going on, where is everybody, they said, we don't know anything, and so I just took them that that's what was going on. Nothing had changed. It was all normal. So
well, plus most of the time you have to go inside to look at these stat sheets.
True.
If you're outside, you don't know.
You're not
so
going to take
if
the time
you lay
to do
the team down and you go inside and find out they left 5 minutes ahead of you, what are you going to do? Get your team up after 2 minutes of rest?
You're not going to wait. You're going to waste 30 minutes at minimum.
Exactly.
And that 30 minutes will not have benefited them beyond maybe getting a snack in them. So I guess the last thing is, as mushers, is this what we want? Is this the type of race that we want to be in 10 years or next winter?
So, I mean, personally, the spot tracker with the button on it, I disagreed with. I agree with us having a tracker with us so that people can watch us and follow us. That is great. That's awesome. But having that help button in the first place was a big deal to a lot of us. We're tough Alaskans. We're out here mushing and racing Iditarod. Let's tough it out like they always have.
Race the Iditarod.
And that threw a little bit of a wrench in things when a lot of people hit that button in a couple of years there. That thing was used a lot, and now this is going to be even more so.
I would agree. And on that same thing, I feel like because we have the trackers with the help me button, I feel like mushers are less prepared. They're not prepared to take care of, what if I get stuck out there for 24 hours? That was always a question we asked. And before, the answer was carry 24 hours worth of stuff. Don't be wearing a cotton hoodie in a windstorm with a sled that you can't fit in and a sleeping bag that's not big enough. That was the solution, was carry the right gear. When you have the help me button, the solution becomes, if I get stuck for 24 hours, I'll be rescued. And the race isn't set up to rescue people. That's not their job. The dog teams are supposed to make it through what the snow machines and the airplanes can't. So anyway, I completely agree. I do not think this is what we want. I do not think this is what the mushers on the whole want. I think if it is implemented, it will be to the detriment of mushers getting into it. The kennels that are longer established will have a bigger advantage. It's going to become a new aspect to racing that's not really about mushing a dog team. It's about managing a race, not about mushing a dog team. And I think that takes the attention away from what this sport is about. So I don't want to see it happen. If it does happen, I'll have to jump right in with everybody else and put it to our advantage. But I don't want to see this happen.
And a lot of us aren't going to be able to use it to our advantage because of financial reasons and family reasons and things like that. We're not going to be able to use it to our advantage like some people are. and that'll be a huge difference.
Absolutely, and I want to be able to race you and everybody else,
yeah.
musher and team against musher and team,
Yeah.
not musher and team and support crew.
Yeah.
Versus, it's not about our support crews battling.
No.
It's about you and your team running the race as well as you can
Mm-hmm.
and making good decisions, and that's the challenge and that's the
Yeah.
allure. So anyway, and try not to make anything too much longer here. Do you have any closing thoughts?
The only thing I could say is, the race for years was about the dogs, and then it went to the mushers a lot, and we've all been fighting to get it back to being more about the dogs and the teams and the individual dogs in our team, and this is going to take away from that even farther. So I'd really hope that we don't go in this direction, and we keep fighting to get it back more for the dogs.
Yeah, I think we keep the focus on the teams and mushers being able to do. We have a lot of good mushers that it's about staying well rested enough and staying to where you can make good decisions throughout the race, not being one more unit that's being managed where I can just tone out and we'll get ultra marathoners that just can run really hard and feed the dogs well but don't have to know anything about dogs.
Yep.
Because my crew will make those decisions for me and they'll call me and tell me what to do.
Yep.
So pretty soon, what are we going to be getting?
We'll be
The
seeing a lot
ultra
of
marathoners
jockeys.
out there that are dog jockeys and not
Yep.
racers. Is this going to become manage a kennel and field a team and hire a jockey, and no longer will you see the mushers who raised and trained these dogs actually race in the event?
Yep.
I mean, we might be getting way out into outfield, but this is starting to lean in that direction.
Oh, yeah.
Horse owners don't race their own horses in the Kentucky Derby.
No, they don't.
So
Yeah, I mean, you might be able to manage it for a year or two to keep it low key, but it's gonna, with this new rule, if this happens, it is definitely going to go in that direction quicker than anyone imagines.
I absolutely agree. Well, these are just some rambling thoughts of Iditarod mushers, but if anybody wants to post questions, I'm pretty sure that we can maybe answer some questions along the way and
Definitely.
try to feel our way through this. And I just want to take a kind of an unbiased look at it. Obviously, we have an opinion,
Yep.
but to make sure that we consider all the aspects before the Iditarod takes a step that's either going to be very hard to take back or is going to fundamentally change the race for a very long time to come. I think it's a discussion that's worth having with everybody who has an interest in the Iditarod, whether it's be racing it or fans of the race or people who have raced it years ago and are advocates of sled dogs in Alaska and the Iditarod Trail and the history that goes with that. So let's have the conversation.
Let's do it.